Before we get started, my name's Raphael, and I created this channel to share science fiction stories, the kind that stick with you even after they end. Everything here is made up, but full of emotion, tough choices, and moments that make you think. So, I'll ask just one small favor. If this kind of story speaks to you, hit that subscribe button. I'm working hard to reach my first 0 subscribers, and your vote of confidence really means a lot. And if you've got a second, drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I love knowing who's out there on the other side. Now take a deep breath. The story's about to begin. The gravity on Entala Prime was maybe 3G, which doesn't sound like much on paper, but when you've been living in a glorified cage for 3 standard months, it feels like someone is constantly sitting on your chest. It certainly helped the Kirth keep us docile. We were their novelty, their captured primates, only instead of bananas, they gave us nutrient paste and the occasional electric reminder of who was in charge. I was Private First Class Marcus Vance, or what was left of me. I was the last survivor of the Ares Scout mission, which had been less of a mission and more of a catastrophic failure ending in a spectacular fireball outside their main orbital defense grid. They kept me in a containment unit that was mostly glass and reinforced plasteel, right in the heart of their primary military complex. The air was dry, heavy with the scent of ozone and the weird metallic tang of their chitinous armor. They didn't bother with subtle observation. They stared, all the time. Tall, 6-limbed arthropods, clicking their mandibles and recording my pathetic existence. And then there was her, Princess Valira. She wasn't just a Kirth. She was the heir apparent to the Prime Consulate, the daughter of the guy who effectively ruled this entire sector of the galaxy. She was the definition of power made manifest. Most Kirth looked like armored nightmares, but Valira had a terrifying kind of elegance. Her carapace was a deep, polished obsidian, segmented perfectly, catching the harsh, blue light of the observation deck. She was usually flanked by 2 hulking Praetorian guards, but sometimes she'd dismiss them, just to watch me alone. She never spoke. She just stood there, her compound eyes, hundreds of tiny lenses, focusing on me with a cold, analytical intensity that made my skin crawl even under the thick, recycled air of my cell. I had hit my limit. 3 months of crushing gravity, synthetic food, and being studied like a particularly stupid microbe. My sanity was fraying. The guards thought I was just pacing, but I was building up to a final act of pure, distilled human absurdity. A final, magnificent fuck you to the universe. She came that Tuesday, cycle 73, right when the internal lighting dimmed for the simulated night. She stood exactly where she always did, 10 feet away, separated by 3 inches of bulletproof, blast-rated polymer. I stopped pacing. I looked right back at those alien eyes. I straightened my spine as much as the G-force allowed, took a deep, rattling breath, and I confessed my undying love for her. "I love you, Valira," I said, my voice cracking slightly from disuse. I didn't shout. I made sure it was clear, conversational, and utterly insane. "I know this is ridiculous. I know you're an insectoid goddess who probably views me as a novelty pet, but I have to say it. I love the way your armor catches the light. I love the terrifying efficiency of your bureaucracy. I love the fact that you haven't vaporized my homeworld yet, even though you totally could. I love you, and I want to marry you." The silence that followed wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the entire complex holding its breath. I could hear the faint thrum of the life support, the distant rhythmic clicking of the guard patrols, and the frantic, spiking beat of my own heart. I waited for the laughter. I waited for the guards to rush in and administer the standard attitude correction shock. I waited for her to simply turn and walk away, leaving me to my delicious, self-immolating despair. She didn't move. Then one of her primary mandibles twitched, the only sign of emotion I'd ever seen her display. It wasn't amusement. It was calculation. She lifted a segmented limb, and a small, silver device materialized from the air beside her. It was a universal translator. She keyed something into it, and a voice, a synthesized, deep alto, oddly devoid of warmth, filled the sterile chamber. PFC Vance, your proposal is noted. Glad to hear it, I muttered, already feeling the shame wash over me. I'd done it. I'd gone full lunatic. Time to settle back into my depression. Your species is currently designated as a Class 7 threat. Resource depleted, highly aggressive, and diplomatically unstable. This status is problematic for the stability of Sector 4 Beta. Yeah, we get that a lot, I said. Look, can we skip the geopolitical summary? I just needed to get that off my chest. Closure. She ignored me. Her compound eyes narrowed slightly, focusing not on my face, but on the small, tattered patch of the Terran Coalition flag, still sewn onto my shredded uniform jacket. The Prime Consulate has been seeking a mechanism to transition your species to a Class 2 protectorate status. A full military annexation is inefficient. A treaty is impossible due to your internal political fragmentation. I frowned. What does this have to do with me wanting to marry you? The synthesized voice was absolutely clinical. Marriage is a binding diplomatic mechanism across multiple stellar cultures. It provides a legal, permanent conduit for resource management and political alignment. It is the only maneuver that simultaneously satisfies the Galactic Council's non-aggression protocols and the Consulate's expansionary mandates. She paused, and the silence this time felt heavy, like the entire weight of the galaxy was resting on my shoulders. Yes, Marcus Vance, I accept your proposal. We will be married. I stood there, mouth slightly open, feeling the blood drain from my face. It was worse than any shock rod. It was a complete, instantaneous demolition of my reality. Wait! I stammered, scrambling backward until my spine hit the cold plasteel wall. I was joking. I wasn't joking about the love part, obviously, but the marriage part was just a metaphor, a desperate cry for attention. The Kirith Consulate does not engage in metaphor regarding matters of state. Congratulations, Private Vance. You have just secured a conditional peace for your homeworld, and in approximately 36 hours, you will become the first human consort to the Kirith Prime heir. The next 36 hours were a blur of chaos, confusion, and the terrifying realization that my stupid, self-pitying confession had just triggered an interstellar incident. The first thing they did was cleanse me. Not a shower, a full decontamination process that felt like being sandblasted with high-pressure solvents. They took my rags, replaced them with a garment that was less armor and more flowing, heavy silk, deep crimson, the color of the Kirith royalty, and fitted me with a neural dampener that stabilized the effects of the One. 3G, making me feel almost normal again. I was moved from the cell block to a wing of the consulate building that was all polished granite and terrifyingly intricate alien architecture. Every corner was covered in carvings depicting the glorious history of the Kirith, a history that involved conquering everything in sight. My escort was Captain Thrax, Valira's chief strategist and handler. Thrax was massive, even for a Kirith, his armor scarred from countless battles, and he smelled perpetually of ozone and suppressed rage. He didn't like me. This was evident in the way he walked 3 paces ahead, never looking back, and the way his mandibles clicked incessantly, a sound I quickly learned meant, "I wish I could crush your fragile skull." "You have caused extensive logistical difficulty, Vance," Thrax hissed through his own translator, the voice a low, gravelly snarl. "I apologize for my sudden elevation to galactic diplomatic linchpin," I retorted, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "I didn't exactly fill out an application. You have disrupted the long-term stabilization plan, The Prime Consul is displeased. Very displeased. The Prime Consul, Valira's father, the being who held the fate of Earth in his chitinous hands. That meeting was scheduled for the morning. I couldn't imagine a worse way to start a new life. When I was finally settled in my new, ridiculously opulent quarters, a room bigger than my entire apartment back on Earth, complete with a terrifyingly comfortable bed and a view of the toxic, neon-lit skyline of Intala City, Valira entered. She wasn't in her usual formal armor. She wore something lighter, more flexible, but still unmistakably royal. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace that was unnerving. She still smelled metallic, but underneath that there was a faint, clean scent, like ozone after a thunderstorm. "Consort Vance," she said, using the synthesized voice. It sounded like a title, not a name. "Princess Valira," I replied, standing straighter. I was trying desperately to read her, but her face was an unreadable mask of hard shell and complex lenses. "We need to discuss the terms of the union." I thought the terms were, I say I love you, you say yes, and suddenly Earth doesn't get glassed. "That is the simplified summary for your species' consumption," she corrected, stepping closer. I instinctively took a small step back. She noticed, but didn't react. "The reality is far more intricate. Your confession, while reckless, provided the necessary legal pretext for the Peace Through Union clause in the Galactic Precedent Scrolls. A formal accepted proposal by an enemy combatant offers us the highest possible diplomatic leverage." "Leverage for what?" "For everything," she stated simply. "The immediate consequence is that the Terran coalition is now bound by the Treaty of Consortia. This treaty requires immediate resource reallocation to the Kierth Protectorate, specifically the entirety of your orbital defense fleet, 70% of your lithium reserves, and all technological patents related to FTL drive efficiency." I stared at her. "You're demanding our entire Navy and our FTL tech? That's not peace. That's total subjugation." "It is a necessary step toward Class 2 Protectorate status," she countered, her voice unchanging. "Had we annexed militarily, the cost would have been higher. This way, your people survive, albeit under new management. You should be grateful, Vance." "Grateful? My confession was supposed to be a joke, a defiant act of self-destruction, not an act of galactic treason. And yet, here we are," she said, turning to face the view screen showing the neon city. "Your emotional instability has proven unexpectedly useful. However, the political fallout is severe." "I know. I'm marrying an alien princess. How much worse can it get?" Valira turned back, and for the first time, I felt like she was genuinely looking at me, not just analyzing my bio readings. "The Prime Consul is not the problem, Vance. He is merely the executor of the consulate. The problem is the Grand Council, the High Strategos, and the entire military-industrial complex that views this union as an insult to Kierth purity. They see you as a biological contaminant." "Nice." "Furthermore," she continued, holding up a segmented finger, "the Zidonian hegemony, our primary rival, has already filed a protest with the Galactic Council. They claim this is a hostile political takeover disguised as a marriage, and they are using this union as a pretext to increase their fleet deployment along the Sector 4 border." "Wait, so my marriage is starting a Cold War?" "Potentially a very hot one," she confirmed. "The Zidonian hegemony is currently demanding that I marry their crown prince, Rixa, instead. They claim the human proposal was made under duress and is therefore invalid." I felt a cold dread settle deep in my stomach, far worse than the 13G ever was. This wasn't just about me surviving anymore. This was about being a pawn in a game played by beings whose lifespans were measured in centuries and whose concepts of chess involved entire star systems. "And you accepted my proposal instead of the Zidonian prince. Why, exactly?" I asked, trying to sound cynical instead of terrified. Because Rixa is an idiot, Valira stated flatly. And more importantly, the Zidonian hegemony is far too powerful. If I marry Rixa, the Kirth become the junior partner in the alliance. If I marry you, the human, the Kirth retain absolute control. You are a captive, Vance. You are controllable. You are entirely expendable. She walked toward the door, her armor clicking softly on the polished floor. We have 36 hours until the ceremony. You will meet the Prime Consul in the morning. Understand this, consort. Your job is not to love me. Your job is to be the diplomatic shield that prevents a full-scale galactic war. Do not fail. If you do, the Zidonian fleet will not be the only threat to Earth. She left without another word. I stood there alone, the crimson silk feeling heavy and suffocating. I'd gone from a desperate soldier in a cage, dreaming of a defiant end, to the most politically significant and simultaneously most disposable husband in the galaxy. I looked out at the alien city lights. I hadn't won anything. I had just traded a small metal cage for a cage made of politics, treaties, and the looming threat of 3 different stellar powers. I had to figure out how to survive the wedding first. And more importantly, I had to figure out how to survive the honeymoon. The next morning, I was escorted to the Prime Consul's private audience chamber. Thrax was still my shadow, his mandibles clicking loud enough to be heard over the hum of the climate control. The chamber was overwhelming. It was vast, circular, and dominated by a raised dais where the Prime Consul sat. He was larger than any Kirth I had seen, his carapace almost black, laced with veins of glowing internal energy. He didn't wear traditional armor. His body was the armor. He had 4 massive articulated arms resting on the arms of his throne, and he stared down at me with an expression that conveyed millennia of superiority and profound annoyance. "Marcus Vance!" The Prime Consul's voice boomed, transmitted directly into my ears without a translator, a sound that felt like grinding stone. "You are an unexpected complication." I swallowed, trying to project respect without looking subservient. "Prime Consul, I assure you, my intentions were purely personal." "Personal intentions are irrelevant in matters of the consulate," he corrected severely. "However, Valira has convinced the Grand Council that this union provides an immediate, necessary legal buffer against the Zidonian aggression. Thus, you live, for now." He leaned forward, and the sheer weight of his presence was terrifying. "You will adhere to all protocols of the consort. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not touch Valira in public. You will not attempt to communicate with your former government. You are a symbol of our benevolent dominion. Nothing more." "Understood," I said. "I'm a glorified statue." "Precisely. And statues do not cause trouble. Now, let us discuss the immediate diplomatic consequences of your existence." He gestured with one massive limb, and a holographic projection shimmered into existence between us. It wasn't a star map. It was a single, immense, complex document written in flowing alien script. "This is the Treaty of Consortia, version 3. 1. It is the document that binds the Terran coalition to the Kirth Protectorate. It was signed, in absentia, by your designated diplomatic representative upon Valira's acceptance of your proposal." "Wait, who signed it?" "A low-level attaché stationed on the neutral planet of Xylos 9, Thrax supplied, his voice dripping with contempt. "He signed it out of fear, believing he was saving his homeworld." "He was," the consul confirmed. "However, the Zidonian hegemony has challenged the validity of the treaty based on one specific clause, Section 4, sub-paragraph beta." The consul zoomed in on a block of text. "The Zidonians claim that since the proposal was initiated by a Class 7 captive, The treaty is only valid if the consort can prove his absolute suitability and worthiness to the Karth hierarchy before the completion of the first solar rotation of the Union. I frowned. And what, exactly, constitutes absolute suitability and worthiness? The consul's compound eyes seemed to glow faintly. It requires you to successfully complete a task deemed impossible by the Grand Council. A task designed to prove that the human species possesses a unique, exploitable trait that justifies the risk of this union. A trial? I asked, a sense of grim familiarity settling over me. We were back to being tested, just on a galactic scale. A trial, the consul confirmed, his voice now laced with chilling anticipation. The Zidonian hegemony is watching. The Grand Council is watching. If you fail, the treaty is voided, the Zidonians intervene, and your homeworld is designated an immediate military target by both sides. And if I succeed? If you succeed? Valira's voice cut in from the side, where she had been standing silently. The Grand Council will be forced to accept the Union. The Zidonians will be humiliated, and the Karth Protectorate will gain an unprecedented strategic advantage. The consul smiled, a terrible, silent parting of his mandibles. Your trial, Consort Vance, begins immediately after the wedding ceremony. You will be tasked with retrieving the scepter of Xylos from the ruins of the old empire on the planet Kalan 7. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Kalan 7. I knew that name. It was a dead world, a graveyard of civilizations, protected by autonomous defensive systems that hadn't cared about treaties or political alliances for 10,000 years. Kalan 7 is a death trap, I stated simply. No one has survived a landing there in centuries. Precisely, Valira said, stepping forward, her obsidian armor catching the light. That is why it proves your worthiness. You have 24 hours to prepare, consort. Try not to die before the vows. The meeting ended abruptly. Thrax escorted me back, his clicking louder than ever, clearly thrilled by the prospect of my imminent demise. Kalan 7, I muttered to him. Why the scepter of Xylos? What's so important about that relic? Thrax actually stopped walking. He turned, and for a moment the contempt in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. The scepter is nothing, Vance. It is the journey. Kalan 7 is protected by the sentinels of the old empire. They are incorruptible AI war machines. They cannot be reasoned with, defeated, or bypassed. They operate only on one directive: eliminate all invasive biological life. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, his alien breath hot and rank. This is not a mission, human. This is an execution designed to satisfy the Zidonians and the skeptical elements of the Council. You are supposed to fail. You are supposed to die horribly, thus nullifying the treaty without the Kirth having to admit error. I looked at the floor, then back at the massive alien. So, I'm marrying the princess, and the wedding present is a suicide mission. It is the cost of your ridiculous fantasy, Vance, Thrax growled. You wanted to be important? Congratulations. You are about to be the most important corpse in the galaxy. I spent the rest of the day in my gilded cage, not preparing for a wedding, but preparing for war. They brought me maps of Kalan 7, or what passes for maps, and schematics of the Sentinels. The Sentinels were massive, self-repairing drones, armed with plasma cannons and shielded against everything short of orbital bombardment. My survival gear consisted of a standard Kyrith survival suit, a small energy pistol that wouldn't scratch the paint of a Sentinel, and a datapad with the coordinates of the scepter. Valira visited me once more, late that night. I need to know your plan, consort, she demanded, standing stiffly across the room. Plan? I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. My plan is to use my massive human ingenuity to avoid being vaporized by a 10,000-year-old murder bot. I haven't gotten past step 1. You are not taking this seriously. I am taking this deadly seriously. I just realized my only weapon is a sidearm that fires glorified flashlight beams. You set me up for failure. I set you up for a test of worthiness, she corrected. The Kirith military would use overwhelming force. The Zidonians would use espionage. We need to know what you will do, what the human species does when faced with an impossible situation. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't cold. She was focused. Every decision was strategic. We improvise, I said finally. We cheat. We use what we have, not what we wish we had. And we don't accept the rules of engagement set by the enemy. Elaborate. I walked over to the datapad, pulling up the schematic of the Sentinel's internal workings. The Sentinels are designed to kill life forms, right? They prioritize biological threats. That means their sensors are keyed to organic signatures. They are ancient AI. They are predictable. Predictable does not mean beatable. Maybe not head-on, I conceded. But you said the scepter is just a relic. The real goal is the journey. The real goal is proving that a human can succeed where a Kirith general would fail. A Kirith general would try to brute force it. I don't have that option. I tapped the schematic, pointing to a small, complex junction near the Sentinel's primary power core. The core is powered by a localized gravity well generator. That's how they move so fast despite their mass. If I can't penetrate their armor, maybe I can disrupt their gravity field. Throw them off balance, make them crash into each other. Use their own weight and speed against them. Valira was silent for a long moment. That is a reckless strategy. It requires precision and speed far beyond your current physical capabilities. Then I'll have to get better at precision and speed, I said, meeting her gaze. I'm not doing this for you, Princess. I'm not doing this for the Prime Consul. I'm doing this because if I die, Earth gets dragged into a galactic war. And if there is one thing humans are good at, it's surviving things we shouldn't. Good, she said, a flicker of something that might have been approval crossing her alien face. We proceed with the wedding at dawn. Do not be late, Consort Vance, and try not to bleed on the ceremonial silks. The wedding was brief, terrifying, and completely public. It was held in the largest amphitheater on Intala Prime, broadcast live across a dozen allied star systems. I stood on the dais, dwarfed by Valira, the massive Prime Consul, and the entire Grand Council, hundreds of chitinous, judgmental eyes fixed on me. I wore the crimson silks. Valira was in full ceremonial armor, segmented and glittering, making her look like a walking, deadly jewel. The vows were less about love and more about allegiance. I pledged my loyalty to the Kirith Protectorate. I pledged to uphold the Treaty of Consortia. I pledged to be a good little symbol. The moment the final vow was spoken, a heavy, resonating chime echoed through the hall. The ceremony was over. I was now married. I was now officially the consort. The Prime Consul raised a massive limb, signaling the end of the broadcast. The crowd began to murmur, the sound like dry leaves rustling in a gale. "The union is complete," the consul announced, his voice echoing. "Now, the proof of worthiness." Thrax stepped forward, holding a small pressurized capsule. "Consort Vance," he addressed me, a triumphant sneer in his synthesized voice. "Your transport to Kalen 7 is waiting. May your fate be swift." Valira turned to me, her expression unreadable beneath the helmet. "Do not disappoint me." "Consort," she said, her voice low enough that only I could hear it. "I won't," I promised, taking the capsule from Thrax. I wasn't doing this for her love, or even for my life. I was doing this because I had accidentally placed a galactic target on my home planet. And now, the only way to remove it was to succeed where all the alien empires expected me to fail. I was the human solution to an alien problem, and I had a 10,000-year-old murder bot to fight. I walked off the dais, the crimson silk feeling like a shroud, ready for the honeymoon, ready for Kalen 7. I just hoped that human ingenuity was enough to beat pure, relentless alien power. It had to be. There was no other option. The transport shuttle was a cramped, unarmored coffin, piloted by a small, silent drone. It punched through the toxic, sulfurous atmosphere of Kalen 7 like a stone skipping across water, finally slamming down hard in the middle of what looked like an architectural graveyard. Kalen 7 was a nightmare of rust-colored dust and colossal broken structures that scraped the perpetual orange sky. The air crackled with residual energy from the ancient war that had killed this world. The gravity was a punishing 5G, even worse than Entala Prime. I felt the weight immediately, crushing me back into the survival suit. I stumbled out, the dry metallic air screaming past my helmet. Thrax hadn't been exaggerating. This wasn't a mission. It was a cleanup job for a highly specific type of ancient AI. The coordinates led me into the mouth of a collapsed citadel. The scepter was supposedly at the center, deep beneath the ruins. I moved slowly, fighting the gravity and the debris, relying on the suit's life support and the dim light of my helmet lamp. The first sentinel found me within an hour. It didn't sneak. It announced its presence with a low, bone-deep hum that vibrated through the ground. It rounded a corner of fused plasteel, and I froze. It was immense. Easily 20 feet tall, 6-legged, covered in armor that looked like solidified time. Its primary plasma cannon began charging, bathing the ruins in a horrific blue light. Its sensor array, a single massive lens, focused on my organic signature. I didn't run. Running was futile. "Okay, Vance," I whispered into the suit comms. "Improvise." I had the energy pistol. It was useless against the Sentinel's shielding, but it was precise. I checked the schematic Valera had given me one last time. G-well generator, stabilized by 3 external regulators. If the Sentinels were 10 millennia old, their internal systems were probably running on obsolete, predictable physics algorithms. The Sentinel fired. I didn't see the plasma bolt. I only felt the heat and the explosive concussion as the air around me turned incandescent. I dove behind a half-melted pillar, the shockwave rattling my teeth. Predictable. The AI knew my location. It would move to a better firing position, relying on its overwhelming mass and speed generated by that internal gravity well. I had to get close. Too close. I waited for the rumble of its approach. As the massive shadow fell over the pillar, I launched myself out of cover, rolling toward its nearest articulated leg. The Sentinel was forced to pivot, its targeting systems struggling to lock onto something so small and close to the ground. It was an impossible target for me, too. The regulator was high up on its flank, shielded by layers of armor. I aimed the pistol not at the regulator itself, but at the ground directly beneath the Sentinel's central mass, where I knew a secondary power conduit for the old citadel ran. I fired 3 quick, weak pulses. The energy was tiny, but it was enough to overload the ancient conduit. A flash of light erupted, followed by a localized magnetic pulse that wasn't strong enough to harm the Sentinel, but it was enough to momentarily disrupt the localized environment. The Sentinel paused. Its sensors momentarily flickered, confused by the sudden, non-biological energy spike. It was a fraction of a second, but it was the window I needed. I scrambled up the nearest piece of debris, aiming the pistol high. I didn't shoot to destroy. I shot to interfere. I hit the G-well regulator with a single, concentrated beam. The beam didn't penetrate, but the sudden, focused external energy disrupted the stabilization field. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the Sentinel let out a mechanical shriek that was picked up by my comms. Its internal gravity generator, momentarily destabilized, began to oscillate wildly, fighting itself. The machine, designed to move with effortless grace despite its mass, suddenly felt the full, crushing weight of 15G. It lurched violently, its 6 legs collapsing inward. The massive machine, unable to compensate for the internal physics failure, lost its footing and pitched forward, crashing into the ruins with the force of a small asteroid impact. The resulting explosion of debris and energy flare was tremendous. I was thrown backward, hitting the ground hard. My helmet cracked, and the world went fuzzy. I tasted blood and ozone. I lay there coughing, the suit's internal damage alarm screaming at me. The Sentinel was silent, buried under tons of rubble, its G-well system permanently locked in a feedback loop. 1 down. The success was exhilarating, but short-lived. The sound of that crash was a beacon. I limped deeper into the ruins. The scepter was in an open vault, guarded by 3 more Sentinels, standing motionless, waiting. They weren't patrolling, they were static defense. They were expecting brute force, not physics interference. I spent the next 2 hours mapping the environment, not the enemy. I found a massive, structurally unstable archway directly above the vault entrance, held up by rusted, ancient tension cables. My strategy was simple. Use the Sentinel's own weight and predictable reaction time to trigger a catastrophic structural collapse. I had to draw them out, one by one. I used the energy pistol to fire a series of highly energetic, non-lethal pulses at the far wall of the vault, imitating the sound and signature of a heavy drill. The Sentinels didn't react to the sound, but to the energy signature of a potential breach. The first Sentinel stepped forward to investigate, moving into the kill zone beneath the archway. I aimed the pistol at the tension cable, firing until the metal snapped. The archway didn't fall immediately. It groaned, settling. The Sentinel paused, its sensors analyzing the structural change. Before it could move clear, I fired a second shot, this time at the Sentinel's shoulder joint. Again, not to destroy, but to disrupt its movement stabilizers. The machine staggered, its foot catching on a piece of debris. The archway collapsed instantly, burying the Sentinel in tons of ancient stone and dust. 2 down, 1 injury, 1 structural failure. 0 brute force. The remaining 2 Sentinels reacted instantly, but not with intelligence, with programming. They converged on the source of the structural failure, assuming a large invading force. This was the hardest part. I had to get them to hit each other. I ran, ignoring the pain in my ribs and the screaming of the damage alarm. I ran straight toward the vault entrance, letting them chase me. My human form, erratic and small, was the perfect lure. As I reached the vault entrance, I dove into the shadows, turning and firing the last of the pistol's charge at the primary Sentinel's head. The blast was meaningless, a final flicker of defiance, but it was enough to draw its full attention. The Sentinel stopped short, charging its cannon. The other Sentinel was right behind it. I didn't wait for the shot. I triggered the emergency explosive charge on my belt, the one the Kirth had given me for breaching doors. It was weak, but contained a highly unstable chemical accelerant. I threw it high, directly between the 2 machines. It wasn't an explosion of force, but an explosion of heat. The resulting rapid temperature spike, a massive, localized thermal anomaly, was exactly the unpredictable element the ancient AI couldn't handle. The primary Sentinel's thermal sensors went haywire. It registered the sudden, massive heat spike as a critical threat to its power core and immediately initiated a defensive, rapid-fire plasma burst designed to neutralize the source. It didn't fire at me. It fired at the Sentinel standing directly behind it. The resulting chain reaction was spectacular and terrifying. The plasma cannon hit the second Sentinel's core housing. The 2 machines, locked in a proximity battle, annihilated each other in a flash of incandescent light and twisting metal. When the smoke cleared, the vault was open. I crawled out of the shadows, bruised, bleeding, and half-blinded. The scepter of Xylos was just a dull, tarnished metal rod lying on a pedestal. It was completely irrelevant. I grabbed it, activated my suit's emergency beacon, and waited for the drone to pick me up. The return trip was agonizing. I was barely conscious. I had succeeded, not by fighting, but by understanding the flaws in the perfect, ancient, predictable alien technology. I had used human chaos to beat alien order. I was brought directly to the Grand Council chamber on Entala Prime. I was still covered in dust, blood, and pieces of my shredded survival suit. They hadn't even bothered to clean me up. The Prime Consul, Valira, Thrax, and the entire Council were waiting. The air was thick with tension, ozone, and the scent of judgment. I was hauled onto the dais, the scepter clutched in my hand. I dropped it on the polished granite floor. It made a loud, pathetic thunk. "I retrieved your damn scepter," I gasped, leaning heavily on my knees, trying to catch my breath in the heavy gravity. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. The Prime Consul slowly descended from his throne, his massive frame radiating power. He looked at the scepter, then at me. "You survived Kalen 7, he stated, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. "I didn't survive, Consul. I won," I corrected, spitting out a mouthful of blood. "Your sentinels were too predictable. They were designed to fight a war, not to deal with a guy who knows how to break their physics engine." I looked at Valira. She was standing perfectly still, but I could swear I saw a microscopic twitch in her mandibles, the same one she had shown when I first confessed my love. This time, it wasn't calculation. It was something closer to respect. "The Zidonian hegemony is demanding an explanation," Thrax hissed, stepping forward, his contempt replaced by utter confusion. "They claim the mission was impossible. Tell the Zidonians," I straightened my spine, ignoring the searing pain in my ribs, "that they underestimated the human capacity for sheer, ridiculous improvisation." The consul stared at me for a long moment, then turned to the assembled council. "The trial of worthiness is complete. The human consort has proven that Species Class 7 possesses a unique strategic capability, the ability to exploit systemic vulnerabilities with minimal resources. This capability is now deemed an asset to the Kirth Protectorate." He turned back to me, the weight of his gaze immense. "The Treaty of Consortia is ratified. The Union is permanent." I had done it. Earth was safe, but the cost was personal. I had traded freedom for survival. The Prime Consul stepped closer, looming over me. "You are no longer merely a captive, Consort Vance. You are a tool, a highly volatile, unpredictable, and now necessary tool." He gestured to Valira. "Valira, your strategy is validated. The consort is now your responsibility. Integrate him into the command structure." Valira stepped forward, her armor clicking softly. She placed a segmented limb on my shoulder. It wasn't a gesture of affection. It was a proprietary claim. "Consort Vance," she said, the synthesized voice still clinical, but carrying a new weight of command. "You have secured the peace. Now we must govern it." She didn't lead me to a bedroom or a celebratory feast. She led me straight to the consulate's war room. The room was dark, holographic star maps glowing around a central table. Thrax and several high-ranking strategists were already there, their faces grim. "The Zidonian hegemony," Valira began, tapping a point on the map where their fleets were deployed, "is not satisfied with the verdict. They are now claiming that the Treaty of Consortia violates 3 different non-aggression pacts because Earth is not a sovereign nation, but a fragmented collection of warring states." I stared at the map. "Wait, so my success just moved the goalposts?" "Precisely," Valira confirmed. "They are preparing a full diplomatic blockade, claiming the Kirth are annexing a non-state entity, which would justify military intervention." "So what do we do?" I asked. feeling the familiar cold dread return. Valera turned to me, and for the first time, I felt the full force of her alien intelligence focused on a mutual problem. We cannot allow them to delegitimize the treaty. The only way to stop the Zidonian blockade is to prove that Earth is capable of negotiating, unifying, and enforcing the consortia terms. The only way to do that is to give Earth a unified voice, a representative with absolute authority. She paused, and the full horror of the situation dawned on me. And who would that be? I asked weakly. Valera's eyes focused on the single tattered Terran coalition patch still clinging to my ruined suit jacket. You, Consort Vance, you have proven you can survive the impossible. Now you must unify your homeworld. The Kirth cannot manage the internal politics of Earth. It is too messy. You will be sent back to Earth as the prime negotiator and the official Kirth envoy, armed with the authority of the consulate. You will stabilize your species, unify your governments, and enforce the resource transfer terms. You want me to go home? I whispered. Yes, but not as Marcus Vance, PFC. You return as the consort of the prime heir. You are the symbol of our new benevolent dominion. You will be their king, their diplomat, and their warden. I looked at the star map, then back at the princess. I had confessed my love as a final, desperate act of defiance. I had won a suicide mission using physics and chaos. And now, I was being sent back to the planet I fought to save, not as a hero, but as the alien queen's husband, tasked with dismantling its sovereignty from the inside. And what happens if my people refuse to unify? If they reject the terms? Valera's voice dropped, devoid of all synthetic warmth. Then, consort, you will have failed in your duty to the Union, and the Kirth will be forced to employ the military annexation we sought to avoid. You will be the first human we execute. I looked at the vast, shimmering star map, the fate of billions balanced on my broken shoulders. The cage was gone. The battlefield was now my home. Understood, Princess Valera, I said, the crimson silks heavy on my shoulders. When do I leave? Immediately, she replied. The Zidonian ships are already moving. Welcome to the rest of your life, Consort Vance. It seems you have a planet to conquer. Ayeing to Ma'am.